Well, hey students, welcome to week 4 of Are We There Yet? I hope you've been enjoying this series already. If you don't know me, you can probably find out in the chat because someone's probably written my name there. My name is Reed Paul. I'm one of our student pastors, and I'm really not that big of a deal, but I guess I have an easy name to chant or type out in the chat, and so you're probably seeing that happen right now. But I'm excited tonight to dive into this next part of our Are We There Yet series. Ross did an incredible job last week kind of talking about this idea of being in seasons where we just feel dry and distant in our relationship with God. And I actually want to unpack these moments where we feel like a storm hits. I don't know about you, but storms, I don't really have any control of whether or not they're going to show up. They come and go as they please. And isn't life that way sometimes? And isn't probably this very season feeling that way in moments where you have had this pandemic show up that you've had no control over? It's just here, and life is kind of getting flipped upside down. And you're probably asking the same question that I ask when storms show up, is what do I do in the midst of this? How do I find control or safety or security or some bit of freedom in the midst of life just throwing all of this at me at once? So I actually want to turn to a scripture that Tammy Chapman talked about a couple weeks on Mother's Day. It's found in Luke 6, and Jesus is beginning to just have this conversation with people who are present in this moment. It's the Sermon on the Mount, and he's actually talking about this idea that storms are actually going to show up. There's going to be moments where we experience things that are out of our control, and what we are anchored to in that moment is going to matter tremendously. And so what I actually want to do is turn there right now. If you've got a Bible, go ahead, grab that. I've got mine here. Paper Bibles, I love those. They're always great to just be able to highlight, underline things, and take some notes. But we're going to turn to Luke 6 here, and it'll also be on the screen. And we're going to pick up in verse 46. Jesus is saying this. He says, "So why do you keep calling me Lord, Lord, when you don't know what I say? I will show you what it's like when someone comes to me, listens to my teaching, and then follows it. It is like a person building a house who digs deep and lays the foundation on a solid rock. When the floodwaters rise," in essence what he's saying is when the storm shows up, "when they rise and break against the house, it stands firm because it is well built. But anyone who hears and doesn't obey is like a person who builds a house right on the ground without a foundation. When the floods sweep down against that house, it will collapse into a heap of ruins." Another version of this in the book of Matthew talks about the idea of building your house on a rock and building your house on sand. And I think it's really interesting to point out 3 things that Jesus talks about in verse 47 here as to what it takes for us to build on a good foundation. You see, he begins to unpack that there's 3 things that we really want to pay attention to if we're going to build something on something that's going to be able to last, that when a storm shows up, when things come our way and try to take us out, there's going to be 3 things that are going to be really important for us to actually lean into and have at the core of who we are if we're going to actually be able to stand through the storms of life that show up. The first thing he says is, "Come to me." He says, "Come to me." Speaking to himself, come to me, have this relationship with me. May I not just be someone you just check in every once in a while with. May you have this connection with me that you know that you can trust me and that I'm the first one you can come to because I'm going to sustain you in the midst of whatever you're walking through. The second thing he says is listen to my teaching. Hear it. Understand who I've called you to be in the midst of stormy seasons, in the midst of moments where people need to be reminded of the love that is for them. They need to be encouraged. They need to be supported. They need to be able to find hope in hopeless situations. May you look to Jesus' teachings and listen to those things. And the third thing is so key. I think if we do the first 2 and we don't have this third one, we actually are throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We're kind of having a house that topples in on itself. It doesn't have a strong structure. The third thing is this, is follow it. So come to me, listen to my teaching, and follow it. If we don't actually tap into that third piece of following it, then everything begins to fall and cave in on itself. You see, Jesus didn't actually just call us to just be spectator Christians who just walk through the door and expect that in a stormy season when it shows up that we're going to actually just go and turn to a billion other things to try to find our security or hope. He's saying, no, if you actually follow what I've laid out for you, if you actually live and trust in that very thing, that when life shows up and you're navigating all sorts of different things, if I'm the one you run to, if I'm the one you're following, then you can be confident that whatever comes your way, whatever hits, that you're going to be okay, that you're going to be sustained, and that he's actually going to lead you and guide you no matter what you're walking through. But what I think is so important that Jesus is saying in all of this process is, may we pay attention to what we're anchored to. You see, for me, I had a moment when I was your guys' age. I was 16 years old, and for a lot of my life, I had put a lot of time and training and energy into becoming a really good goalkeeper in soccer. I played that for a number of years since I was a little kid. It was the one sport I stuck with the longest. And at 16 years old, I had this vision for my life that I was going to go and I was going to make the Olympic team, and I was going to lead USA to the next World Cup championship. And that was my goal, it was my dream, it was my vision for my life. It was what I trusted in. And at 16 years old, I got a diagnosis of arthritis. A doctor told me, hey, you're probably not going to ever play soccer in the way that you did, and what you dreamed for your life probably isn't a possibility anymore. And if I'm being honest, it wasn't like the next day everything in life was hunky-dory. I actually had some moments where I was frustrated, some moments where I felt really lonely, some moments where I was just like, God, why is this happening to me? I asked those questions. I just felt like things were so out of control. And what I had to do in that moment is I had to pick myself back up. And I had to say, what am I going to trust in? What am I going to choose to be anchored to right now? Am I going to be anchored to my pain? Am I going to be anchored to my diagnosis? Am I going to allow myself to look at this through the lens of being a victim? Or am I going to choose to use this moment and this opportunity for me to pivot in life and for me to pay attention to the things that I'm building my life on? And may I actually realize that me trusting in soccer being my future is very temporary. And it's not actually going to lead to me experiencing the breakthrough and for me to experience the life change that both God longed for me and for the people that he had in my path. And so in that moment, I decided that over the next couple weeks, I was, instead of going to sit and wallow in my pain, I decided to say, God, I'm actually going to run after you in the midst of this. And I dove deeper into my church community. I acknowledged and talked about the frustration I felt because of the storm that I was facing with my church youth group and in the small group that I met with. I took time to actually ask my pastor and my leaders to pray for me for what I was walking through, that my attitude would actually begin to shift, that my perspective would begin to shift, that I would begin to have eyes to see the vision that God had for my life, even in the midst of this storm showing up. It would have been very easy for me to say that God was the reason why all this happened, and I actually don't believe that God actually intended for me to have arthritis. Do I believe that he still can use arthritis in that condition, in that situation, for his good and for me to experience victory and send victory into other people? Absolutely. But it was all about my perspective and what I was anchored to. You see, what I've recognized is that we can't control the storm, folks. We can't. But we get to choose what we're anchored to. And for you, you might right now be anchored to a relationship with the opposite sex. You might be really tied to a friendship that is literally everything that you're trusting in, and that friendship's got to stay what it is for you to feel like you have any purpose in life. Can I encourage you to ask yourself the question tonight, is that very thing that you're anchored to built to last? That if everything crumbles in your life, are you going to actually be able to continue to move towards the purpose and plan that your life was meant to be lived out? Or are you now going to step into something where you say, man, I feel like I have nothing? Because I think what Jesus is ultimately trying to say to these people, and he's trying to say to you and I right now, may you not wait until you're 20 or 30 and you're married and you have your own kids to figure out what foundation you're going to build on. May you in this moment realize that he is the only thing, he is the only one that we actually are called to be anchored to, that actually has the ability to be something that will sustain us and hold us up in the midst of whatever we face and whatever comes our way. And so he's actually trying to help you not look at life a week from now or 2 weeks from now or when this quarantine's over and say, what's left for me? He's actually trying to tell you right now, may you pay attention to the things that you're leaning into. May you pay attention to what you're building your life on so that when you look back on it, you'd say, man, I've got something that's strong and sustainable even when chaos and pandemics show up, because he's actually trying to tell you right now is this isn't going to be the last storm. This pandemic you're walking through right now, it's not the last time that you're going to have a storm hit your life. There could be a moment where divorce happens in your home. There could be a moment where you lose someone that you loved and cared about, either because they backstabbed you or maybe they left this earth. You may have a moment where, like me, you had a vision and a plan for something you were going to do athletically or academically, and all of a sudden something happens and you're like, where do I go from here? Can I ask you to examine your own heart and to look at what you're spending your time on, to look at how much time you're investing into TikTok and Instagram and YouTube and video games? Are those things and are the investments and sacrifices you're making for those things right now going to last? Because as somebody who sat in your very position, Vine is no longer a thing. TikTok probably is going to have the same reality at some point. Video games that I loved to play when I was a kid are things that I don't care about anymore. I'm not saying that we can't have moments where we have fun playing video games and we have fun jumping on TikTok. But when we as individuals look at life and say, this storm's hit and I feel so lonely and I feel so broken and I feel like everything is caving in on itself and I've got no friends and this pandemic has ruined things, I just want to encourage you to ask yourself the question, where am I spending my time and what does that say about what I'm anchored to? Because my hope and my prayer for you is that you would recognize that God longs to meet with you each and every day. He longs for you to know that he's just asking you to come to him, for you to listen to his teaching and to follow it, because he knows that if you'll build your life on that, everything begins to shift, and that when storms show up, there's actually still the ability for you to work through those situations and see victory on the other side of it, rather than letting the storm topple over your life and cause you to feel like there's no chance for you to move forward. And so ask yourself that question. Is the foundation that you're trusting in right now built to last? And if it's not, then be honest about that. And let's begin to take some steps and put some effort in to see some things shift in that reality. Another thing I would challenge you with is where you build your life will determine your survival. Where you build your life will determine your survival. Paying attention to where you're centering that is going to determine how you're going to walk out on the other side of this. Sure, you can wait until school's back to normal and you're able to hang out with all your friends to get this figured out, but why not right now, right here, when you actually have a season and a moment to just focus in on where you're at with Jesus? May this be a time where you begin to anchor yourself to him and him alone. A great book was written by this guy named Rich Wilkerson Jr. He says this, Jesus wants you and I to stop building sandcastles and pretending that you are the king. He is the king, and he wants to help you build your life on the only foundation strong enough to withstand the storms of this life, that being himself. And so students, if I can challenge you with one final thought, it would be this. Remember that it's not about what you're going through. It's about who you're going to. It's not about what you're going through. It's about who you're going to. And so as you look at your own life and you reflect back, may you recognize and realize that he loves you. He's calling right now for you to know. He's saying, come to me, listen to my teaching, and follow me. Trust me. Even in the midst of this hard time and trying time, may I be the first thing that you run to, not the last thing you think about at the end of the day when you're getting ready to fall asleep. Love you guys. I just want to take a few minutes just to pray real quick as we journey through the rest of tonight. God, I ask you to just be near right now. Make each student aware of your presence in this moment. Help us to see your hand at work even in the midst of the storms. And I ask that you would just be a provider of a solid foundation, that you would be the strength that we can cling to. And I pray that those that have struggled to anchor their lives to you, that tonight they would begin to experience that connection. They would begin to see that breakthrough happen, and that you would be the thing that they actually build their entire life on going forward. And so may your kingdom come right now. May your will be done. We trust you. We love you, God. It's in Jesus' name. Amen.